Hey everybody, this is Dan from Pain Free You, and today I have the pleasure of introducing Danny from Seattle, and we got two Dans here, so that's
Mm,
kind of cool. I think that's a first for the success story. So welcome, Danny. Um, Danny's been gracious enough to volunteer to share his story with chronic fatigue and post-exertional malaise and a number of other things. So why don't you introduce yourself and start telling us a little story?
sure. So it's a pleasure to be on. I've watched a lot of these recovery interviews. Actually visualized myself as I was recovering, being on one of these recovery interviews. I watched so much, and you're such a pivotal part of my recovery journey. I'm really happy to be able to share my recovery story from chronic fatigue syndrome. Um, I'll start from the beginning. I was a college student at USC, and I was a senior,
Mhm.
and I played Division I golf there, and I like had a robust social life, a lot of academics, and a lot going on.
Right.
But I didn't realize that in the background, it was like very stressing for my nervous system.
Mhm.
And when I got a bout of mono, I just, my body completely fell apart. My nervous system went to a very hypersensitive state. And so that's what began my journey, is I got mono. And it was pretty difficult at the beginning. I knew immediately something was different. And that's kind of where the medical gauntlet started. And I began to go to a million different doctors and get tests and getting all these different diagnoses like chronic EBV and,
Right.
cellular dysfunction, all that sorts of stuff. And, you know, no treatments helped. They said nothing was wrong with me. Uh, or they would say that, they'd just slap a label on me. But it was very difficult at the beginning. And I eventually was bedridden and couch ridden. And
Oh,
I had to move back home to my parents. And my main symptoms I struggled with were chronic fatigue, chronic pain, post-exertional malaise, stomach dyspepsia, and a whole host of other symptoms because it's kind of a systematic thing. So you get systematic symptoms. So if you probably name a symptom, I probably had it. Just depends on the severity. But yeah, so I was home for about a year and a half.
wow.
And that's when I actually found you in your videos because I was looking up chronic pain and you came up and you started to explain the mind body connection and what TMS was. And that's really what opened my eyes to what could potentially heal me. And then through looking at different chronic pain treatment centers, tried to get in a couple, but I eventually landed at the Point in Malibu. So that was kind of my turning point. It's an inpatient center. It's pretty luxury, but luckily I had good insurance, which covered it. And they have a holistic chronic pain center. And that's kind of what was my turning point, where I started to learn about pain science and how symptoms relate to emotions and thoughts. Um, and that was my first turning point. And then my second turning point was I joined a program called CFS Recovery, where I learned more about specifically how to recover from CFS, and I learned about different pacing and responding well to symptoms and not responding with fear and meeting yourself with self-compassion and self-soothing, paired with, you know, graded structure and gradually increasing your capacity. So after about a year and a half, once I started to understand these
Mhm.
concepts and how they relate to the nervous system and the brain, it took me 6 months to fully recover from couch bound, bed bound, house bound, wherever you want to call it,
Sure.
to now I consider myself at 125% capacity. I am fully recovered. I live a life where I do more than most people. I'm kind of in the last phase of recovery where I still have some residual symptoms come up when I'm stressed or anxious, but the fear isn't there. And, if I keep responding well, they'll eventually dissipate completely.
Now,
And
you have anything chronic, or those things will just come up when stressed and then they'll settle back down?
No. If anything, I have a memory of a sensation. I would say it maybe is around a 0 to 1 to 2 most of the time. And then if I'm stressed, it'll increase, or I have an emotional event that comes up. It may increase, but my quality of I don't even notice it most of the time. And yeah, my quality of life is great. I'm living a full life, and it's just a matter of time until I get, over the horizon past it, because I know that with responding well and the things that you teach, it gives space for my brain to calm down and get back to a fully normal state.
Okay. So real quick, I know CFS, you said you had some stomach issues. When you were dealing with the chronic pain, was it specific body parts that you were dealing with?
For me, it was what you call like a chronic headache.
Okay.
It was, or neuralgia, or whatever you would want to call it, but it was essentially um, I actually call pain sensations because it helps my brain interpret it in a nicer way and calms the fear signal, because that's ultimately what it is. It's just a sensation.
Mhm.
So the sensations were in my head, toward the top of my head, around my head, and um, in the back. And that lasted for about a year and a half. And then once I started to learn about pain science, my nervous system and brain started to play tricks on me, and it started to move
Okay.
to different parts of my body. So, it was my jaw, my hip, that kind of stuff. So, symptom imperative, I believe they call it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was mostly in my head.
When you said you were homebound, bedbound, couchbound, was that mostly the fatigue that had you down and out, or was it the pains as well?
For me, it was the fatigue for sure. Um, but also the post-exertional malaise, I would say, was the primary cause of it, because
Sure.
whenever I would try to, go to the gym or hang out with friends or add any sort of stimulus to my nervous system, um,
Yeah.
my body would fight back for days, if not weeks. So I didn't really have an understanding of gradually increasing stress threshold. I was a very black and white thinker. I would either do it or I wouldn't do it. And I left no room for gradually adding stress to my nervous system.
Okay. Yeah. Now you've mentioned a couple of times, Danny, responding well to symptoms. Was there any element of, your recovery journey where you started to predict better outcomes as opposed to going out and doing more with fear as opposed to going out and expecting better? Because I know the responding well with symptoms very consistent with the things I teach, but I also suggest that there's a big impact by having a better expectation. Like I'm going to go out and it's going to go well, as opposed to I'm going out terrified and oh no, I'm going to crash. So how much of that was involved in, your journey, if you will?
So I'm going to answer that question by tackling how I tackled my stomach symptoms.
Okay.
And essentially, I was extremely restricted in my diet. The only thing I would eat was fish tacos, because I was convinced that everything else hurt my stomach. So, breakfast, lunch, dinner, fish tacos.
Wow.
And the way that you get over stomach symptoms, and the way I did, I was also celiac at the time, I had a gluten intolerance. And the way you get over food intolerances is by gradually adding more and more. But you can't just gradually add more and more. You actually have to add messages of safety as well,
Mhm.
because you can't just add messages of safety and just suddenly eat like a loaf of bread. Your stomach's going to go crazy. But you also can't just slowly add it and be like, oh, this is going to hurt my stomach. Oh, this isn't good for me.
Yeah.
So it's a mixture of doing things, but also doing things with the right mindset. So I have a YouTube channel, Chronic to Cured, and what I say is my equation for recovery is mindset plus structure equals recovery. So I believe that if you have something like chronic fatigue syndrome, you can't just lie in bed all day and have a good mindset and recover. But so you can't just have a good mindset, but you also can't just have a good structure where you're not responding well mentally to symptoms. So I believe it's a marriage between the both when you're dealing with um, chronic illness or something like chronic pain where you avoid doing certain things because you think it might trigger pain.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what I was getting at with setting the right expectation. You've got the right mindset to say, I'm going to eat this little bit more of a food I haven't had in a long time, and it's okay. It's healthy for me. It's good for me. It's not a problem. Whereas in many cases, people with food restrictions are terrified of the food. So they think, oh no, this is going to cause a reaction. They eat it and then they have the reaction and then they freak out and they're kind of reinforcing the negative cycle. But the way you're approaching it, marrying what did you say?
The mindset plus structure equals recovery. So
Okay.
it's marrying the mindset with the gradual exposure.
Yeah. So basically, do a little bit more. And I actually have a process, 6 steps to resuming activity. Decide what you're going to do, expect it to go well, do a little bit of it, and if symptoms come up, respond as well as you can. Repeat, rinse, like lather, rinse, repeat. Just keep on doing that. And over time, you're teaching your brain, well, he actually ate some food. There was a response, like a symptom, but Danny didn't seem to be too upset about it. So I guess it wasn't that big of a deal. But if you do the first part, you expect it to go well, you eat a food, and if you get a symptom and you panic, you're just confirming the brain's belief that it was the food. So you have to have both sides of that equation, the positive expectation, great response, regardless of symptoms. And that is how I believe, from what you've told me, that's how you successfully taught your brain to turn down the volume of all these sensitivities. So now you basically eat whatever you want.
I eat everything I want, and I enjoy it because there was definitely a time when I couldn't. And that's one of the things that's why having this was, I would say, the best thing that ever happened to me is because of the gratitude I have of like before I was a D1 golfer and I didn't really appreciate it until I wasn't able to do it for 2 years. And you start to learn what you value.
Mhm.
And it just makes it that much better when you're able to do things. Like I do a lot of things where I was like, wow, just a year ago, I wouldn't even be able to do half the things. Like there was this big staircase, and I would have a flare up for a week if I went up one flight of stairs. And just this weekend, I ran up five flights of stairs as fast as I could, just to show myself, just to prove of myself I could. And of course, I didn't have any symptoms, but yeah, it's just a lot of gratitude and being like to your point about responding well to symptoms and expecting it to go well. Whenever I did have symptoms in my recovery, I think it was very important to be as unbothered as possible. That's kind of the word I live by, is just being unbothered. Because I think once you respond to these symptoms with neutrality, you take away the fear and you break the loop that's going on in your brain. There's no reason for the symptoms to perpetuate.
Exactly. That's beautiful. That's exactly what we want to do because if you respond to symptoms, I love the word unbothered, you take away the power of the symptom because it's like, well, I'm not. It's the whatever. That's my whole indifference thing that I talk about. Okay, so I have symptoms, whatever, don't care. So what? Right? That's unbothered in a different word. So that's awesome. Are you sick of fish tacos now, or you still love them?
I am sick of fish tacos. That's the one food I don't eat actually.
I thought
So I
you
guess I
would
do
do.
have restrictions.
It's not a
But
restriction, it's
yes,
a preference.
yes.
That's funny. So when you said stomach issues, was it like, is it pain? Was it gas, bloating, loose, constipated? Can you define the stomach a little bit more just for people to
Sure.
relate?
The symptom for me, I guess the label I got put on was gastritis,
Okay.
which is essentially burning and bloating, whether it be due to a food or an emotional trigger. But essentially, that's what they say when they don't know what's wrong with you. And I actually had a GI doctor, like the guy of guys. I had a referral and I went through all these GI doctors to get to him. And he was like, we don't know what to do with you. Like, we've tried everything and we can't help you anymore. And I was just like, how is this where the Western medical system is at? And I'm sure a lot of people on your channel have experienced disappointment with the Western medical system, and I've had a lot of personal experience, and I've also reflected with the medical system, reflected on the medical system, and I believe it's just due um, to like their business model and the fact that they're usually like one-off appointments, and they have so many patients that they can't really work with someone uh, in an integrative way, in a holistic way, and they have their specialty and they stick to it, and they just won't take a holistic approach. And that's why I think, your channel is so important and people in your field, because it is a more like integrative, holistic approach.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I agree with you. Doctors are almost forced into specialties. All right, you're going to be the pancreas guy. That's all you're going to do. And through that single focus on a bodily organ or a certain system, they're blind to so much of the rest of it. And it is not taught in medical school, the power of the brain, fear, stress response, nervous system dysregulation, all that stuff. It's not really taught. So it's left to guys like me. And if you've got a YouTube channel, you're going to be sharing it. It's up to us to go out there and share it and teach it, because if they're not taught it in medical school, they're not going to know how to do it in their practice. Now, the cool part is I was just at a mind body workshop called the PPD Association conference, and it was 268 people showing up to share what they know about this stuff. Presenters on stage, all sorts of great presenters. I would say probably 25% of the room were physicians learning about this stuff so they could take it back to their clinical practice, which I think is fantastic. But therapists, psychiatrists, physical therapists, chiropractors, even scientists who are doing research, there was a heck of a room there in Boulder just last week. So the word is getting out, but it's more of a grassroots. It's not going to come top down through the medical system. It's just not.
I think it's going to be another 30 to 50 years, maybe, for the Western medical system to catch up. It is
Not if
so
I got
slow.
anything to do with it.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
kidding.
Maybe next year.
Well, the whole structure is based on, I mean, realistically, if you owned a hospital, would you want your doctor saying, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with you, go home," as opposed to, "Here's all the procedures I was trained in college." You can't make money telling somebody that there's nothing wrong with you. You're just freaked out. And I'm not saying that from a negative standpoint. It's just that you're right. Their business model is treatments, surgeries, drugs. Hey, go meditate, relax, teach your brain that you're okay. How does a hospital make money with that? They don't. And I'm not
So
saying it
true.
in a very nefarious way. It's just their business model is geared towards specialties. And you're right. It's not a holistic approach. It's not a whole person approach. And so, yeah, so you're on the money with this stuff. You've intuitively learned from me, from the CFS recovery people, from whatever other influences you've had, and the way you're explaining it says to me you understand it deeply, which is why I believe you've recovered. And whatever little tiny things that are still showing up, it's not going to be an issue. You've recovered from fear because you understand it. And I teach that all the time. Core focus of my work is what's going on, what causes symptoms. Once you know that, then you can assess, is this what's going on with me? Once you have that, it's a matter of teaching your brain that we're actually okay. And the way you've described that gradual exposure, the mindset plus structure equals recovery. It's like the right mindset's required. You just can't gradually start eating more if you're freaked out about it, right? So I think you've explained it very well. Um, I'm sure, just watch. I'm sure some people in the audience will be. Isn't that amazing how Danny has this knowledge at this early of an age? You've got this insight at such an early age where some people struggle their whole lives with symptoms and don't figure it out until their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. So you have the gift of understanding this stuff deeply, and this will serve you for the rest of your life.
Yes, I think I I say that this is the best thing that ever happened to me because I didn't know how to treat myself. I knew how to treat others and treat life and maybe have success. And I had all these different characteristics that, helped me get into USC, helped me, play professional golf and be a D1 golfer. But I didn't understand how to treat myself. And now that I'm 100% recovered from CFS, I still take rests. I take naps and
Awesome.
I don't just push through work. I actually treat myself better, whether that be self-talk or treating my body with more respect and understanding like, I have a little less energy today. I'm not gonna push myself through this workout. And it's just, there's a lot of culture and people talking about, hustle, 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 grind, grind, grind. But I find that the people that go the farthest are the people who can run the marathon of life and just not get burned out and just stay
Mhm.
consistent. And with recovery, it's almost like the slower you go, the faster you go. Because if you're trying to go really fast and trying to recover like tomorrow, you're going to get in kind of a push cross cycle. And you're also reinforcing the fear that,
Mhm.
I have to do this. I have to get to this treatment modality so I recover. And I can't tell you how many different treatments I did with I think treatments have a place, but if you do them with the right mindset and the right expectations, because early in my recovery journey, I spent tens of thousands of dollars my parents spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to give me different treatments, but I was going into these treatments with feeling like this was the thing to fix me and seeing if this was the cure. And I would go into it with a bunch of anxiety and I didn't want to go. I felt like I had to do it to recover. I felt like I had to journal 30 minutes a day, had to meditate 30 minutes a day
Same.
to recover. And
Those are-
that's
yeah, you've heard me say those are fixing activities. And if you're doing fixing activities all the time, your brain must say there's something broken. The brain has no choice but to say, we got a problem. Look at all the work he's doing. So I'm sorry, I jumped in. I'll let you finish your thought.
no
Sorry
problem.
about that.
I I still do healing modalities now, but because I love them and I enjoy them and I feel like they regulate me. Like I still do hypnotherapy, whether it be in person like once a week or guided by myself because it makes me feel good and I don't feel like it's a have to like a fix of recovery. It's
Mhm.
just something I do in my free time. It's like a hobby and it just happens to be potentially helpful. And that was just one of the things I struggled with during recovery is finding or going into different things with a fixing attitude, like something was wrong with me and it needed to be fixed,
Mhm.
instead of from I want to regulate myself. This is good for me and I enjoy doing it. I think that being in a play mode, whether you think about the polyvagal system, you want to be in a parasympathetic mode as often as possible.
Sure.
And like just doing things you enjoy. I think play has a big place in recovery because it teaches your nervous system that you're fine. I actually build in times in my day where I am in like I consider it like regulating time, like things I like to do, things that teach like when I was recovering, I would block out times where I did things I like to do. It's times where I knew my symptoms were going to be lower. And so it teaches your brain over time that, okay, we can be in a space where we don't have symptoms. And the more time you spend there, instead of doing all these have tos, I don't want to pick on acupuncture, but that was one of the things I tried where it was extremely dysregulating for me. I didn't want to go. It hurt. But I felt like I had to do it to fix me. So
Yeah, no, that's great. Um, we just had a conversation in the group about needing to versus wanting to. And so you are doing these calming, uh, kind of like regenerating your just everything. You're just settling yourself down because you want to, because it feels good. I am curious. Are you back to playing golf again?
I'm playing in professional golf tournaments. I play probably
The PGA
five
or
times a
the
week.
on the
Not quite PGA, like the equivalent of like minor leagues
okay.
in
That's
baseball.
cool. So you have an interesting opportunity to observe the other players. It's been my belief that TMS is pretty prevalent in the golf world. Like, you know, uh, Freddie, what's his last name?
Freddie
Couples.
Couples.
He's had back pain his whole career.
Mm.
He's got the loosest swing. I don't think he had a physical problem. I think it was just the stress of professional golf. And if you don't play
Tiger
well,
Woods.
yeah, Tiger too. If you don't play well, you don't get paid, and you have the expense of caddies and travel and housing and all that. It's an extremely stressful sport, and I think all of the golfers out there that have had lifetimes of symptoms. Yeah, Tiger Woods for sure. It took him 5 surgeries to get the right one, and he's
He's
got
no, he's still doing surgeries. He's got some
well,
mind body stuff going on for
yeah,
sure,
but
but
crashing his car didn't really help.
no.
But yeah, Tiger, Freddie Couples, there's got to be others. But as a golfer, you will probably have a really interesting opportunity to see that kind of stuff firsthand and potentially bring this type of work to the golf industry because you're in it.
It's very interesting you say that because I had a conversation with a another fellow golfer, and I told him my work, and he said, "Oh, that's so interesting. I have one of the symptoms you listed. I have IBS," and I'm just like, "Oh boy, like I already know where this is going." So
But
it's
there,
it has to do with the I think the personality types that get into golf and the personality types of TMS, and four of them are catastrophizers,
Mhm.
anxious, people pleasing, perfectionists, and those tend to be the people that gravitate towards golf.
Sure.
So it's a really big subject with golfers.
It would be curious to hear from you a little bit down the line as to whether or not all of this mindset work is helping your golf game to stay
So
more regulated on the course and not panic if you get a bogey. And like, I would love to hear from you down the line and just say, you know what, this stuff has translated into better golf. I
it
would
already
love
has. It already has. I've made more money since I've recovered since I've been before, and maybe my I don't know if my objective golf game's increased, but I just am able to identify when I'm feeling slightly dysregulated, and I believe in breath work during flares or when you're feeling dysregulated. So I just do some 5 second box breathing, and I'm able to regulate, and it did help my golf game. It's funny you
and
say
you
that.
can do that on the tee while waiting for your turn to hit.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think, if you pay attention to it, you may have the opportunity to put on little presentations, in the clubhouse before, everybody tees off and just like, hey guys, if you've got chronic symptoms, you don't need them. You're not sick. I often thought a while ago that it would be really cool to kind of travel with the tour and just present on this stuff. Obviously, life gets in the way. You got to make a living and you just can't go traveling around, giving presentations. But for somebody who's out there playing, you're probably going to see more and more of that uh, as you get around more players. So I was just curious. Being a golfer, I played a little bit from 30s to 50. Um, I wasn't great, certainly not at your level, but I do enjoy the game.
Yeah, it's one of my actually regulating activities, one of the places I go into play mode. And as I got further along in recovery, that was something I would do every day because I knew my symptoms were going to be lower. So I used it as a anchor to remind myself that this is what happens when I feel safe. This is what lower symptoms are like. And I believe in having a lot of regulating activities throughout the day. And actually, one thing I wanted to touch on was I believe in building your dream life during recovery. And a lot of people will wait until they don't have pain or don't have symptoms to do the things they want to do or to live a happy, fulfilling life.
Mhm.
And I think that just sends more danger signals to the brain. And so, people have different capacities. People with chronic illness maybe are more constrained or they have lower capacity. But if you can add if you can think about your dream life tomorrow and what that looks like, filling it with regulating activities and things you like to do and potentially, healing modalities that you find regulating, you don't feel like you have to do. Maybe there's a couple have tos in there. Some people have to go to work, some people don't like driving, whatever it may be. Sometimes those are unavoidable. But I actually believe in kind of building a structure of the day where you're doing a lot of regulating things and things that are helpful to your brain and to teach your brain that you're okay. So that was really helpful for my own recovery. Thinking about what does my day look like tomorrow, where even if I have symptoms, I will feel fulfilled and I will be regulated as much as possible.
That's awesome. Yeah. Don't wait until you're feeling perfect before you decide what you want to be when you grow up. Right. And going out and doing enjoyable things with people you like is part of the journey to get better. Because if you wait at home until you feel perfect before you ever leave the house, the minute you leave the house, you're going to flare because you're not teaching your brain anything by staying home, staying on the couch and saying, when I feel good, then I'll go live life. No, you got to be willing to experience some symptoms so that you can teach your brain that the symptoms aren't concerned, right? And what was that word you used? Unbothered. I love it. It's a great word. So if you start to go out and experience the world, expand your capacity, and symptoms come along and you're unbothered, that's a learning opportunity for you and your brain to go, this must be a safe activity. You can't do that on the couch. Your
Mhm.
brain doesn't learn anything on the couch other than all this world that you're avoiding is the danger. So brilliant.
Yes, and for some people who have lower capacity, I know that whether it be fatigue or um, post-social malaise or whatever reason that leaves you uh, more restricted in the activities, there are things that you can still do because the situation isn't good. Like objectively, it's not great, but what you can do is make the best out of it, and that is in your control. And so I would add regulating things every day that I enjoyed. Like for me, a really safe space and a place where symptoms are lower was the shower. And I would take a couple showers a day because it was regulating, it felt good. And I think that when you have lower symptoms while you do something, perhaps you're out with friends, like you mentioned, and you notice you have lower symptoms. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. And so I think that things you do when you have lower symptoms, you should do them as much as possible because it's only going to send more and more safety to your brain that there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anything else you want to share? Because I've loved this. I mean, your ability to describe your experience and why the lessons you learned were important to you, I think will help a lot of people. I think you get it. You didn't get lucky. You actually get it intuitively, intellectually, wisdom. You get it, which is why you're doing as well as you are, even though you spent, a year and a half homebound, bedbound. So,
I would, first of all, the situation is difficult, and I want to acknowledge that, but it's not you aren't responsible for being where you are, but you do have the control to get better, and you are in the right place. You are, watching Dan's videos, obviously. Like you have the answer and the solution. This is the right place. This is the right field of, modern uh, pain science and TMS and all the work that Dr. John Sarno has done. But as far as advice goes, something I did that really worked for me is I made a promise to myself. I remember where I was. I was driving in a car,
mhm.
or I was getting driven, and I made a promise to myself that I would stick with one or two coaches or programs until I recovered because for me, that was CFS Recovery and the Pain Psychology Center in Los Angeles. And I made a commitment to myself that I would stick with these things until I recovered because jumping from thing to thing just sends more danger signals to you. And if I know I'm in the right field, maybe the program or the coach isn't perfect, but they're good enough and it's a proven system to work. So, what I would say is stick with, commit to one or two things in the mind body space
Mhm.
until you recover. And that was a promise that was really helpful for me because when I had bad days or like higher symptom days are an integral part of recovery. It's impossible to recover without them.
Right.
And so making this mental commitment to myself, it burned the boats. It allowed me to not backpedal and switch to something else when it wasn't working. I just stuck with something that I knew worked, I knew was good enough until I recovered. So that's what I would say.
Well, and the analogy, if we bring it back to golf, is try getting to the pro level, changing golf coaches every year. It's just not going to work because everyone's going to be like, you should do something different. You should do something different. You're going to end up so confused. You'll end up like Tin Cup, you know, with all the devices on your head and everything. You remember that movie. At least I hope you do. You're
Of
younger.
course, no, of course.
Every golfer knows that movie. But
I,
you get the point though. Jumping from TMS mind body coach to coach to coach to coach, you end up so confused. And I have people in my program that are talking about all these various techniques that I don't teach or recommend, and they're getting them from this book or that coach or that person's video or that podcast. And they're trying to blend all of these various practices, and there's no cohesion to it. And it's, they end up more confused. And then they're doing all this fix, 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 fix. The analogy I like to give is how much time would you spend in the garage rebuilding the engine in a car that's brand new and working perfectly? You don't have to fix, we have to regulate. I like the use of that word that you have brought up a number of times. We need to settle. We're not broken, we're just amped up.
to your analogy, I didn't have 10 swing coaches teaching my swing, but I had 10 different doctors telling me, giving me different treatments and giving me different prescriptions. So,
Yeah.
you got to stick to something that works. And those 10 swing coaches might all have a good system, but they're all different. And so they all might work. But if you don't stick to one, then you're going to keep on going in circles.
Yeah. No, I agree. Beautiful, man. If you don't have anything else to share, I am thrilled with what you've shared already. I am thrilled for you and your recovery. Um, I'm thrilled to see whether or not you're making it on the tour. When do
Well,
you going for Q school?
I that was a plan before. I'm actually very focused on my YouTube right now, chronic to cured, and giving back what I learned because it's just such a I understand how difficult it is, whether you have a chronic or illness or chronic pain. And I just want to like give back what I learned and just help people um, get out of that and get to being back to normal because they are normal. And I just want that to be um, put across. So I'm very focused on my YouTube right now. The golf has taken a slight demotion in my priority scale, but I'll
Well,
continue playing tournaments and all that stuff. So.
well, that's great. You're out there, even if it's minor leagues, there's only several hundred people at that level in the US. And so it's quite an achievement at that. So
Thank
kudos
you.
to you.
Thank you.
Uh, Listen, if I can ever do anything for you, reach out. I'm thrilled that you took the time to do this success story. I'm glad that my videos were part of the journey. And yeah, unless you got anything else, we'll wrap this one up.
Yeah, I just want to say that you're a hero of mine. And if you're watching, you're in the right space. So
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Danny. And go kick ass, man. You got a
okay.
hell of a future in front of you. So I appreciate you. I'll check out your channel. We'll be sure to link it in the description of this video here on YouTube as well as on my Facebook channel where I post these. So hopefully you'll get a couple extra viewers and subscribers. And once again, I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Take care.